Okay, everybody ready? All right, I'd like to welcome everyone to the Monday, January 27th meeting of the Pine Bluffs Town Council. Will everyone rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
First item is the agenda.
I move to amend the agenda, so item number 4, Tallgrass High Plains carbon storage discussion is moved to item 1 under new business.
I'll second that.
It's been moved and seconded to move the item number 4 under new business to item number 1 under new business. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries.
I move to approve the agenda as amended.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the agenda as amended. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Hearing none. First item is the consent agenda.
I move to approve the consent agenda.
Second it.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda. Any discussion? My only thing I'd like to make clear is the building permit for 600 Simpkins had 2 potential locations, one of which was not approved. So when it goes out, it needs to specify that the one approved location is correct.
Next to the alley.
Yes, the alley location.
And I believe he's aware of that, but we'll let him know.
Okay. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. On to new business. Item number 1, the Tallgrass High Plains carbon storage discussion.
Thank you. Hopefully this allows you the attendees to see, but the council can also see effectively. Going to walk through and provide an update on our project. I know we've had, I think, an introduction some time ago with City Council, some one-off updates, but thought it would be useful to provide a broader update to the community. First up, just introductions. My name's Scott Prestige. I'm with our Government and Public Affairs team.
Good evening, Cody Wagner. I'm Director of Land for Tallgrass, and I've been managing the acquisition of the land rights associated with this project. And so I do want to just state, we're going to, as Scott mentioned, we're going to run through our project, give an update, help, I think, for some folks here, be able to see exactly what it is we're doing, what it isn't, as well. But I do want to state, first off, our project is largely focused east of town and south of town. So the project itself does not implicate or affect the town of Pine Bluffs within city limits, anything of that nature. So almost all of our operations are miles away from town. So just want to help, paint that picture. We did send out, I'm sure most everybody in the town did receive notification from us a couple of weeks ago. Those notices are part of a statutory requirement for our project. As we formalize all the pore space for the project, the Oil and Gas Commission or state statute requires notice be sent out, and that includes owners within half a mile of the project boundary. So we'll talk about what the boundary means as well, but we did end up sending the notification out to the entire town for information's sake, but certainly understand that it needs some clarification for some folks to understand exactly what we're doing here, and then we'll be available certainly to address any questions or anything.
Thanks, Cody. So just to introduce the company, first and foremost. This is a map of our national footprint. We operate in 14 states across the country. We have 10,000 miles of operating pipeline, over 1,000 employees that service and maintain the system. All of the green lines you see is natural gas infrastructure. That sort of purple line is our crude oil infrastructure, and then the blue is our water infrastructure. We do a good amount of water-related work in North Dakota, Wyoming. You'll see some of the dots here on this map, Colorado, Texas, and in Ohio. Here in the state of Wyoming, we've been, I think a steady and long-term employer in the state. I should perhaps back up just real quick and say you can see that the core of our assets really focused in Wyoming, Nebraska, Colorado, and Kansas. In the state of Wyoming specifically, in addition to the nearly 200 employees that we have close to 3,000 miles of operating pipeline infrastructure. And our project that we're going to talk about tonight it's hard to tell from this map exactly, but there's this red line is our Rockies Express pipeline, and the blue line that you see next to it, that is the Trailblazer pipeline. They operate very close to one another, so this map, it's hard to distinguish between the two, but just to point them out real quick. So that blue line is the Trailblazer project itself, and then the hub that we are building off of for CO2 sequestration, which we will discuss. When it comes to Wyoming, there's a couple really important competitive advantages as it relates to capturing and permanently storing or permanently sequestering CO2. One of those advantages is the geology. The geology here is well understood, it's well mapped, and there is existing infrastructure and pipeline corridors that have already been planned. Historically, you can see particularly the existing CO2 pipeline in orange on this map. Hundreds of miles of existing CO2 pipeline operating in the state, primarily almost exclusively to serve enhanced oil recovery. That's not what we're doing, but the point is that there is a long history of operating these CO2 pipelines. The other significant competitive advantage that the state of Wyoming has is that it was one of the first handful of states to receive primacy from the EPA. This is a long process that the state had to go through. It really began back in 2009 as the state built out a regulatory framework and statute, and then in 2020, the EPA granted the state of Wyoming permitting primacy to oversee the sequestration process. And so that, again, is a huge competitive advantage. Wyoming was the second state in the country to receive that authority from the EPA. North Dakota was first, followed by, more recently, Louisiana, and just a couple of weeks ago, or maybe even just 1 week ago, the state of West Virginia. There is a long queue of other states that are in that line, that proverbial pipeline within the EPA to seek primacy, including states in this area, Utah, Oklahoma. Texas has been working through this process for a number of years, and several others. All right, Cody, I'll let you go the next couple slides.
So we did pass out some handouts that also have this depiction on them as well. But when we're looking at carbon capture sequestration, we're studying the geology. We're looking for several characteristics, and the geology one is that it has space in it. So think of a sponge, effectively, that would allow the storage of CO2 or other products, other fluids, but in our case, carbon dioxide. So it also needs to be permeable in that the CO2 can move through the formation, and that helps the storage capacity overall. And then we're also looking for a cap rock. And so as part of the whole Class 6 program, the main concern, the main thing that the DEQ or the EPA is looking at is to ensure that when the CO2 is put in that formation, it's going to stay in that formation. So ensuring that any freshwater formations, potential aquifers are protected, from CO2 leaking into those as well. So what we're looking at here, we've got identified a couple of formations at the bottom of that, that stratigraphic column there, but the Lions Formation is what our project is for. And the Lions Formation here is just over 9,000 feet below the surface. So when we will be drilling wells, we are currently actively drilling these wells down to 9,000 feet, then we'll be injecting into those, into that rock. So, as mentioned, the project footprint, this map will depict, I'll walk up here to be able to talk from it a little bit better, but come through and kind of quick. But for reference, here's the Colorado state line on the bottom, and then the Nebraska state line on the east right side here. This green area, highlighted area, is 193,000 acres, which encompasses our project footprint. That is a subsurface footprint, potential footprint for the unit. So when we, this purple dotted line, sorry, you know, we take a half-mile buffer around that, and that's where our notifications went out to. So those notifications went out to the certified mailings went out to nearly 2,000 addressees. So it touched a lot of people to inform them of the project. However, the folks that are directly impacted by the project, we've been in contact with and been working with for largely, we're nearly at 3 years now that we've been talking to folks. Sorry, can everybody hear me since I'm not on the microphone? So we started out here several years ago talking to landowners in the project area about leasing their pore space and subsurface space at those deep depths. And we worked through, we've had, we've had a lot of outreach efforts to have discussions with folks. The green depiction is where we have secured those rights voluntarily with landowners. And so that represents about 92% of our project footprint. The state has a process to allow projects such as this to go through. It's called unitization, and we have to go through that process with the Oil and Gas Commission. The state requires an 80% consent threshold for us to then go through that process through the Oil and Gas Commission, so that any lands that we don't have will be brought into the project so that we can proceed. And so that is where we're currently at. That is what triggered the notice letters to go out. For references, the Class 6 permits we have are these blue dots. So we currently have 6 permits, 5 of which we are drilling currently, and then this will be, the lines here will be our pipelines to transport the CO2. Scott pointed out the Trailblazer pipeline earlier. This is that right in the southeast corner of the county. From there, we are currently constructing a compression facility, and then we'll be building pipeline up to these well sites where we'll then inject it down hole. We have a permit up here. That would be the nearest permit to the town. That is just over 3 miles away from the city limit. That is effectively an inventory permit for us. We recently just shot seismic up in that area. We shot seismic over this last year, basically south of I-80. We shot seismic up over this area, 3D seismic, just in the last month. And so this permit here is currently, we have approved, but we may look at moving it depending upon, the geology data we get back. So ultimately, when we inject down in these wells, the CO2 will spread out laterally through the formation, and it'll spread out several miles over, talking decades. We do a lot of modeling on this stuff. We do a lot of monitoring on as well to understand where the CO2 is. Primarily of which we'll monitor, where it's at, but also that it's staying in the formation and it's not migrating out of the formation. So for each injection well we drill, we also drill a monitor well right next to it that doesn't go into the injection formation. So when we think about that, the stratigraphic map here, and we're drilling this will be our injection well into the Lions Formation. We'll drill a monitor well right next to it that will come to the chug water formation. So that will monitor that the CO2 is not migrating out of the storage formation. And we have a lot of, we've got a lot of protocol in place and responses that are planned for in the event that that were the case. But to get these permits, we have to satisfy that it's, it's not going to do that. But it is routinely and actively monitored as we go through.
So to jump in and also just to emphasize a couple points. As it relates to receiving permitting primacy from the EPA, you have to meet or exceed EPA regulations as to what they put in place or require for any other Class 6 wells anywhere else in the country. Wyoming stands out in exceeding EPA regulations, particularly from a monitoring standpoint. And so just one piece to know, Cody mentioned there's a monitoring well at each one of these locations. We are also required to monitor the water supply at various depths. Clearly, at 9,000 feet, we are well below any of the aquifers. However, we are still required to monitor those. We have to do ongoing seismicity monitoring and a variety of other requirements as well. I should also note, I'm a public affairs hack, so they don't give me anything too important, but Cody gets some toys. And when I say that is that he has examples of the cap rock and the pore space rock, and I've held them. And that pore space rock, really, if you think about it as a hard sponge, it weighs less than half of what that cap rock weighs. It's pretty impressive when you actually put it in your hands. So we mentioned that these wells have to be miles from one another, because when you go down to that 9,000-foot depth and the CO2 spreads out, you want to make sure you're maximizing that development opportunity so that the CO2 isn't interacting from one well to a neighboring well and they're too close together. They need to be separated by miles. One of the benefits of that is it means you have a reduced surface footprint, where you may have an example, these vary from location to location, but here's an example of a potential well pad site, and then it might be 10 miles away or more to see your next actual pad site. This has taken a significant amount of time and a number of different steps from a permitting standpoint. Starting up top, we went through an 18-month-long FERC process at the federal level. FERC is the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, essentially receiving the authorization to convert that Trailblazer pipeline from natural gas transportation to CO2 transportation. That was awarded in the fall of 2023. We also went through a many months long process with the Wyoming Department of Environmental Quality, DEQ, in receiving the Class 6 permits from them as it relates to drilling the 6 injection sites, the 6 well pads. We've completed all of our county permitting to date. Cody talked about the leasing that has occurred. In addition to the pore space leasing that has been, not entirely finalized, we're continuing to reach out to folks and continuing to sign people up before the unitization hearing that's coming up. But in addition to that, we also have 100% landowner agreement on the pipelines that he pointed out that would be built. The drilling began back in November. And we're going to continue to work our way through that process for the wells that are permitted that Cody pointed out. And then the next real significant step is that unitization hearing that's going to take place in February with the Wyoming Oil and Gas Conservation Commission. Assuming that the construction continues to stay on target and on time, we're looking at being operational the middle of this year, perhaps later over the summertime. Why are we doing this? I think that's an important question to answer. Certainly, the project itself is going to provide a significant amount of benefits, but this infrastructure is in demand. There are a number of entities from utilities to companies that want to produce hydrogen, to build data centers, to build, new power generation or connect existing power generation facilities. There is a market demand for the ability to capture and sequester that CO2. There is also some market demand for infrastructure that can provide a reliable resource or a reliable access to CO2. We've encountered different examples where, say, a bottling plant was located next to a facility that was a CO2 emission source. That facility ended up, for whatever market conditions or other reasons, ended up going out of business, and then therefore the bottling facility had to go out of business. And you ended up having two stranded assets instead of one. We have had entities, whether it's in ag food processing, to want to access that CO2. The healthcare industry can use CO2 for a variety of different applications. You can use CO2 in the production of methanol, which is a lighter marine fuel. There's also ways to take the CO2 and put it into advanced cement concrete manufacturing processes. There's a variety of different applications for the CO2, but one of the things that investors want is that predictability and that certainty, and infrastructure provides that, where you're not just attaching yourself to one particular emission source, but you're attaching yourself to a system that is connected to several. And so that is a huge advantage, and it's a huge advantage for the state of Wyoming as it relates to potential investment from other companies that are looking to locate next to those resources. Tallgrass specifically, just talking about what this project means and the benefits from it, during construction as it relates to both the direct tallgrass employment, but also the contractors, the indirect jobs, the induced jobs. We're talking about over 750 jobs during the construction time frame, 40 million in labor income, 50 million in tax revenue. During operations, still over 100 full-time jobs brought to the area. Again, millions in ongoing labor income to the region, as well as ongoing millions of dollars in tax revenue. So I should say that there has been a sizable amount of landowner payments that have taken place over the last 3 years, and with this project becoming fully operational, it allows similar payments from a different sort of mechanism, and we can talk about that if there's an interest, that could last in some cases for the next couple of decades. And so there is that important, I think, just landowner benefit that is directly tied to this project, in addition to just the job creation from the investment itself. I'll pause there. We have some other backup slides that we can dive in, but I think that we've given you enough information to open it up to some questions, if that sounds okay to council.
Great, sounds good to me. I would just encourage everyone to be respectful, but ask questions one at a time if you have one.
If maybe you could repeat the questions for the people watching online.
Okay, yeah, I'll do my best. Yes, sir.
I got a question. Where's all this CO2 coming from to begin with?
Where's all the CO2 coming from to begin with?
Yeah.
So I think that it's important to consider this project as having multiple phases. Phase one, which we're in right now, a good amount of that CO2 is coming from ethanol factories, ethanol plants, ethanol producers located in Nebraska. Now, that's the first phase of this project. As additional phases are grown, I should note we have submitted an EPA Class 6 application in the state of Nebraska, and we are looking at other applications. While Nebraska doesn't have permitting primacy, certainly we can still pursue those options in the state of Nebraska. The geology that we're looking at extends out from this part of Wyoming into Nebraska and then actually down into Colorado. So there's good geology in this entire area. I think an easy way, or an oversimplification perhaps, to think about this, in the long run, as multiple phases of the project are built, you'll see Wyoming infrastructure connected to the system, and you'll see emissions in Wyoming that will be injected in Wyoming, and perhaps emissions from Nebraska injected in Nebraska, but you will also see probably a mix of different things. But I think that we're just in this first phase, and I think long run, you'll see more of what I just described. Anything you'd want to add? Okay.
How does it affect the mineral owners?
Do you want to talk about the payment process?
Yep, absolutely. So this project, where this is located, there really isn't any mineral production in this area, right? So that is a key attribute of another reason why this is a favorable location, because we don't have legacy well bores, things like that to work in. Now, the rights themselves, the pore space is a surface owner right, and so that's been codified by the state that the surface owner owns the pore space, and so pore space would be, you'd have to have absence of minerals. If there are minerals in the pore space, then we would have to work with the mineral owner to work through an agreement. But we also have to show that there is an absence of minerals in the formation that we're injecting in.
Can you actually go beneath that formation? Can they drill through it? Is it going to be possible to drill through it, deeper than that, deeper oil?
Correct. Sorry, I did not.
Natural gas.
I'll repeat. So can you drill deeper through our storage formation to access deeper formations? Yes, you can. One, I'll say the most prospective formations in this area would be the Niobrara, Codell, and potentially the J sand formations. Those are the formations that are productive around here, whether you go west of Cheyenne or you go east into Nebraska. All those formations are above our storage formation. Now, not to say there wouldn't be anything ever prospective below our formations, but if an operator wanted to drill through our formation, there would just be protocols and procedures, that we would work with them in collaboration with the Oil and Gas Commission to ensure that if they were to drill through the formation, they're doing it in a way that will protect the integrity of the storage formation so that it wouldn't leak out. But it wouldn't prohibit anybody from drilling through our formation.
What happens if you get some bad leaks?
So there will be, we do remediation. Again, there will be protocols that will be put in place to protect from that happening, and it will be monitored as well. But we'd have to come in and reseal or take some other steps to help protect it. All of it would be from either the drilling as well as the type of casing pipe, that's put down hole, to ensure that the CO2 won't degrade it, things of that nature.
Hypothetically, what if you did get a really bad leak? What are some of the effects that could happen with really, strong CO2? Is it bad for your health? What can happen?
All right, so ultimately, what could happen if there is a large leak of CO2? So CO2, if it's leaked to the atmosphere, it will dissipate quickly into the atmosphere. Right now, it is typically CO2 is heavier, and so it would stay at the closer to the surface, but any kind of wind or anything will dissipate it out into a water formation or a drinking water formation. Again, we're monitoring that so it's detected early on. I mean, you're not any kind of leak is going to be, it would be a minor leak if there were a leak. It would be a minor leak and be detected early on. It wouldn't be just a massive situation. Scott, anything you want to add on that?
I'll add a few things. So I do think, going back to this stratigraphic map here, the Niobrara formation in this area that Cody mentioned to you is sort of the depth that has attracted to most mineral right developers, oil and gas developers. That's at roughly 5,000 feet, and we're talking about our work at 9,000 feet. The distance to the surface at 9,000 feet, there are several layers of caprock that are impermeable. And so I think it's important to note, just from the geologic process, you have very briny, salty water that's been trapped at 9,000 feet for millions of years. It's not gone anywhere. We're harnessing the natural processes in this storage process itself. As it relates to any potential pipeline leak, for example. I think I can walk through some safety components here, and this is all based on federal data that's been recorded for decades. So starting up this little chart here on the bottom left of the screen, it looks at the frequency of incidents, comparing pipeline frequency to rail to transporting by truck. And essentially, I would say transporting by rail and truck, something happens all the time. You're right next to it, to an interstate. That is certainly safe, but it is 13 times safer to transport a product via pipeline. To give you a different way to look at this, and this is talking about pipelines as a whole, not any one particular type, but just pipelines as a whole. An individual is more likely to be struck by lightning twice than to be seriously injured or die from a pipeline accident. So that's just gives you a little bit of context on probability. Now, taking this pipeline incident information in the bottom left-hand corner and then looking specifically at it in the chart on the top right, comparing different types of pipelines, CO2 pipelines is on the bottom. They are the safest pipelines. They have the lowest incident rate. There has been 0 fatalities related to any pipeline incident since these things have been operating in the 50-plus years across the United States. There is a good amount of data. There's over 5,000 miles of CO2 pipelines, again, across the country. CO2 itself, non-explosive, non-flammable, non-toxic, non-poisonous. It exists all around us. This, and as Cody mentioned, if you ever had a situation, it does dissipate. Now, there are examples that we can talk about if folks are interested, but there is a lot of data as it relates to pipeline safety and CO2. Yes, ma'am.
But what forces the CO2 through the pipeline? Is it mixed with water? And if so, what is the water source? No water.
No water. No, so the question was, what allows the CO2 to move through the pipeline, and is it mixed with water? So that we don't mix it with any water. We actually put it in dehydrators that take all the water out. So we're moving in these pipelines 100% pure CO2. In part because if you are ever able to sell it, most of those buyers want it in a pure state. And so we have dehydrators and compressors that then take it to a pressure where we're able to move that CO2 from one location to the next, and also, of course, to inject it into the formation at 9,000 feet.
Okay, but then what about chemicals being mixed in with it as it goes below? Do you mix chemicals?
I'm not aware of any of those details. That's not something that I've been asked. I don't know if you have information.
No, it is absolute pure CO2 that's being injected. So no chemicals that are being mixed in there. So I'm not sure, if there's something to that, or if you have more information related to that
So there's
inquiry.
It's pure carbon dioxide.
Yes.
Compressed carbon dioxide.
Correct. Pure carbon dioxide.
Underneath, and maybe this is what you're referring to, at 9,000 feet, there is very salty, briny water that exists there naturally. So that is at that depth that exists within the formation, but we're not injecting anything else but CO2.
And all of this is coming from industrial processes and power plants.
Industrial processes, yes, absolutely. We don't have power plants signed up for this project right now, but those conversations are happening.
Okay, and so eventually, in the future, could that also mean, because now we're starting to develop nuclear power plants within Wyoming, does that mean that eventually we could be taking anything produced from a nuclear plant and putting it through the pipeline?
So I don't think that you're gonna have an emission stream from a nuclear power plant where that would make sense. Nuclear reactors, you're gonna use the nuclear material to heat boilers, to turn turbines, and so that doesn't have an emission stream that I think we would be talking about. Emission stream from a power plant, if you to think about any industrial process where there is combustion, right? Whether it's a manufacturing facility or a natural gas plant or a coal plant, if you have an emission stream in that stack, that exhaust stack that then goes into the air. There are a variety of requirements for a variety of different chemicals in that emission stack, whether that's NOx, sulfur dioxide, mercury, et cetera. There's a variety of requirements that in many cases at federal level, state level are already in place. The CO2 in emission stack, in this particular situation, would have to be segregated and separated from the rest of that emission stack in order to then reach that 100% purity level and enter our system. So if that helps answer that question, but I don't think nuclear would be part of the equation.
I guess I'm still so confused because if I understand CO2, plants take in CO2, correct?
The question is, do plants take in CO2? Yes, yes,
Okay, so
absolutely.
if the plants take it in and they actually need it, so why is there such a push to pull the CO2 out of the atmosphere? The plants need it.
Sure,
So I'm really confused.
So the question is, why are these efforts taking place when plants utilize CO2? I think that the short answer is that there is a strong market demand from a variety of different entities that want to connect to system or make investments where they know that their CO2 emissions are being captured. Now, if you step back, our project, we can transport over 10 million tons of CO2 per year on this pipeline system. Now, that's not insignificant. That's a significant number. But if you step back from this particular project, other sources of CO2 that are being emitted are at a scale much larger than that. And so I think you could say that CO2 levels are likely to increase, and that will be the case for, years to come unless more and more of these projects are put in practice and put in place. So that being part of the answer also is that whether you want hydrogen production, for example, if you're going to produce hydrogen and you're going to capture the CO2, you have to have a place to do that. If you're going to have a power plant, a natural gas power plant that wants to make sure that its CO2 is certified as low carbon, say there's an example where that power is sold to a neighboring state and they have power purchase agreements where they want to make sure that they sign up for power that is considered low carbon. You need to have a place to put that CO2. And so there are market demands, I think, that are key important drivers in this, and it goes way beyond anything I've just described. I'm just giving you, I think, a few examples.
So are you gonna be extracting CO2 out of it also, or just putting it underground?
The question is, are we going to extract from the resource under the ground or just inject?
You're talking about using it for other things.
Just inject. We would just inject.
My question has always been, I know CO2 is necessary for life.
Yeah.
Is there research out there that I could look at that shows at what point is there too much CO2? And is it possible that by a lot of carbon capture being going on around the country, will we get to a point where we don't have enough to grow green grass and trees? And the whole thing is always, I'm sorry, it goes right over my head. I don't understand what would happen if you didn't do this.
Right,
Would we all die from CO2?
Is the point climate change? Are you dancing around that? Is it supposed to be helping with climate change?
That certainly is one benefit. You can absolutely make that argument. that there is a climate benefit. And I think that, so the question, I should repeat the question, do we ever get to a point where you have these projects where we don't have enough CO2? And is this related to climate change? And so my answer would be, there is certainly a climate benefit. Now, the other part of my answer would be, what I said earlier, is that the amount of CO2 that we're capturing is not insignificant. It's sizable. But there, you have to think about around the world, emissions coming from a variety of countries, whether that's the United States, or Russia, or China, or South America, or wherever that may be. There are a number of emission sources that you're not seeing this apply to. And so this technology, this situation here, provides a significant local benefit to the landowners, but also provides a unique market opportunity for those investors who want to attach to this system. And so I don't think, personally, just speaking for myself, that we're going to see a point where there's so many of these systems put in place that, we're taking CO2 down to a low level where plant life will no longer be possible. Now, that's just me saying that. I think that there's probably a ton of resources out there where you could go and you could find information about carbon levels, where they're trending, why they're trending in that direction, and what that might mean. But I can just tell you, I can speak specifically to our project, that there is certainly a market driver.
Are you guys federally subsidized through taxes and things to make this project work?
So the 45Q tax credit is a federal tax credit for the emitter. And so you will have the emission source qualify for the credit. Our system, as a transportation system, we benefit from the contractual agreements with that emitter. And so there is a payment made, like in many pipeline systems, where that product is transported in the pipeline. Now, at $85 a ton to sequester, that's the credit value for 45Q. If you have a purchaser who comes to that emitter and says, I will pay you $100 per ton, if you're that business, what are you going to choose? It's a pretty obvious choice. And so you will see entities that are emitters that are benefiting from the credit that other companies in the CO2 space will want to actually purchase that CO2 to utilize in other ways.
What with the changing political climate, and they're talking about doing away with some of the Green New Deal things, is that going to affect you guys?
So going back to when sequestration benefits, carbon sequestration research has been placed on the books at the federal level, and the advance of that work over the past couple of decades, it's seen broad bipartisan support. From George W. Bush to Obama to President Trump to Biden, and there's been no indication that we've heard yet that would show that that's going to change. We'll certainly see. We're talking about the first week and a half of a new administration, so we'll certainly be watching that.
So does your company buy into the narrative then that CO2 is causing climate change? Does your company buy into that narrative?
The question is, does our company buy into the narrative? Say it one more time.
That CO2.
That CO2 is causing climate change. I think that I would say that climate change is real, and that humans are absolutely part of that equation. Absolutely. You want to jump in with anything? I'm sure I've skipped over something, and he's more knowledgeable than I am.
How does earthquakes affect your storage facilities?
So the question is, how does earthquakes affect our storage facilities? Again, so this is an area that has been seismically quiet. And so we shoot 3D seismic on the surface, and that is so that we can get a good view of the subsurface for any faults that are there. And we have to be satisfied, as well as satisfied the DEQ, that is a limited to no risk factor in this area. And so we have done that. If there were a lot of faulting, then that would be a potential concern that could be a potential leak point for the CO2. But again, we've shot seismic to to get a good view of that. We also have seismicity monitors placed across the project area. We have had for the last year that are monitoring, getting a good baseline read of what the seismic activity is in the area. So nothing's been, I mean, I think to date, we've picked up, an earthquake in Texas here, but nothing happening in this area.
What about when they frack? You go into an oil well and they frack, they're causing a small earthquake under there. Is that gonna affect it? If you're in say you're in the Niobrara over in this area, and I realize they haven't proven anything on the oil, but they haven't tried over here either. But what if they were fracking up above you, then what's that gonna do?
So the question is, what effect does fracking have on our operations? So again, it would be very limited to no impact, because when they're putting pressure in through the hydraulic fracturing process, it is limited to that zone that they're injecting back into, right? So again, with all the layers of rock that are between, I mean, you're not filling, when they're fracking, you're not filling it on the surface, just the same way you wouldn't be filling it down there. It'd be isolated to that target zone that they're looking at.
And maybe this might help also. We do have this slide as one of the additional slides that tries to illustrate some of the different monitoring requirements, from groundwater to seismic to monitoring as it relates to above the injection zone. We have to work, and we have worked with Wyoming Department of Environmental Quality as it relates to a monitoring, reporting, and verification plan before development, and there are ongoing requirements based on DEQ requirements that we have to adhere to. It's these Class 6 permits. It has been referred to as one of the toughest permits you can get in the country. There is so much that goes into it from a monitoring standpoint and from a reporting standpoint. It's hard to actually get your head around it. It gets so significant.
So one more question. So you say, one of the deals you're saying that they use CO2, and I know they use it a lot, but this is not for use, it's only for injection. So this whole area, once it's full, you can't go back in and access it, or could it become something viable that you could use it, if they found something great, CO2 works for us,
So we will manage the injection site. Again, so the emitter currently, well, let me back up and repeat the question, I apologize. So the question is, we're not going to be removing CO2 from the formation. So, and repeat the last part of that so I can make sure I get it correct.
Well, so once it's full, you're done.
Once it's full, you're done.
Yeah, so
Correct.
it really isn't for, I was just reading in here, the uses for it. This will be just a dead source once it's full.
So you could access the CO2 along the infrastructure itself, right? So the CO2 will be moving along at pipelines, and you could access it before it goes into the ground. Now, once it goes into the ground, yes, it's down there permanently. It actually, over decades, over centuries, the CO2 begins to mineralize in the formation and actually becomes part of the rock itself. And so it is permanently locked in place.
The monitor wells that you're putting down next to the injection wells, and you say your injection well's going to 9,000 feet, correct?
Correct.
What is the elevation of the monitor wells?
So the question is, what is the elevation of the monitor wells, or the depth of the monitor wells? Yeah, so it'll be just above our cap rock that was back on. I'm upside down. That's not good. Maybe all right. Yeah, so the monitor well will be into the just above into the chug water formation on that column, and so that is it varies on the exact location, but somewhere in the neighborhood of 8,000 feet, 8,000 some odd feet deep. So it's within hundreds of feet of the storage formation.
So you're putting that there to make sure CO2's not escaping, correct?
Correct.
So you're saying that the CO2 moves laterally many, many miles when you're after and around your injection sites. Isn't it kind of a moot point having that monitor well just next to the injection well? What about 5 miles away.
So the question is, the CO2 moves laterally through the formation, so wouldn't it be a moot point to have the monitor well right next to the injection well, because it'll move miles away? I capture that, correct? So the reason for placing the one, there will be multiple monitor wells, because they're placed at each well location. But also the pressure of the CO2, the most likely leak point for CO2 would be our well bore. Because again, you've got layers and layers of thick impermeable rock. And so our straw, if you will, would be the most likely leak point. And so we put measures in place to ensure that it doesn't leak out of there. But if it were, that would be the location it likely would. And that's also where you're going to have the highest pressure in the formation, is because that's where you're injecting it. That's where you're injecting the CO2. So again, the highest pressure, as that CO2 migrates, as it moves laterally through the formation and migrates out, your pressure gets lower and lower the further you get from the well. And again, that's because it's artificial pressure that we're utilizing to push it down. So pressure, a lot of the potential migration is a result of pressure. Oftentimes you'll have greater pressures. It depends on the formations, the temperatures, and things of that nature.
How much is that pressure?
So the pressure how much is that pressure? The pressure we will be injecting in is in the neighborhood of 2,000 psi. Now there's the pressures and everything. This is part of our Class 6 permits. Is that they're looking at that and regulating that on a routine basis as far as what is the pressure of the formation, what is a safe pressure to push the CO2 into the formation.
So you're saying that's the highest pressure point is right by the injection site, and that pressure decreases as it gets away from the injection site, correct? Is that what
So
you're
I'm saying, okay, just trying to repeat so what I'm saying is that yes, the highest injection pressure point is at the highest pressure of the formation, the CO2, is at the location of the injection.
What would it be 5 miles away if you're injecting it at 2,000 psi?
So the question is, what would it be 5 miles away if we're injecting at PSI? Over the course of several miles, it will reach natural formation pressure. So that would be, what the technical term, effectively kind of a net zero, if you will. Now that's, again, we monitor out as we're injecting in, and we model it, we monitor it. The CO2 will move out several miles over decades. Once we, as was referred earlier, once we fill the formation up, if you will, and we've got enough resistance that we can't inject anymore, then that CO2 will stabilize in place, right? And it just it dissipates out again within the formation, and then it'll effectively stabilize so that it's not migrating anymore.
So how do you know then when it's saturated and you cannot inject any more CO2?
So the question is, how do we know that it's saturated and we can't inject any more CO2? That'll be based on pressure feedback as we're injecting.
Any questions from council?
So I understand that over time, it will rise up. The CO2 will rise up, and at some point, it's supposed to create like a concrete layer? Do I understand that?
So the question is that you understand that CO2 will rise up over time and form a concrete layer. I'm not sure, so as we talk about the formation, this formation that the Lions formation we're going to be injecting into is approximately 75 feet thick. And when we inject into it, it's going to 75 feet in thickness at 9,000 feet deep. So we drill 9,000 feet deep to access a layer that's 75 feet thick. When we inject in the CO2 into the formation, in that 75-foot thick formation, the CO2 will because as Scott mentioned earlier, there is brine water in the formation as well. Well, the CO2 will sit on top of the brine water and kind of spread out through the top of the formation, but underneath the cap rock as well. So that cap rock is a lid on it, and that's effectively what I guess maybe what you're referring to, that it rises. I'm not sure if that's answering the question, but it'll occupy the top of the formation, and then it spreads out like that. So if you think where our injection point is, and we're injecting into the formation, injects out, and then it'll spread and kind of form a V.
Over the course of the whole project, when you're on a landowner's property, do you ever, for any purpose whatsoever, use any property owner's well?
So the question is,
They have an existing well on the property.
so over the course of the project, for any reason, do we use a landowner's well? So the answer is no. We do not use landowner wells. We have sampled out of hundreds of water wells across our project area within the project footprint. We've taken hundreds of water well samples. Sometimes we've taken multiple samples out of those ahead of time. But we're also, Scott, we're also drilling wells on our well locations that will monitor the known usable aquifers in the area.
Just in, if you were to detect that any of this was rising up through an existing well, would you have to cap that well off, a property owner's well?
So the question is, if we did detect any kind of leak into a formation, would we have to cap a property owner's well off? So again, if you think about these things, if you think about the project and the large footprint it has, and if there were any leak detected, one, the leak would, we would identify where the leak point is, and then two, what is the concentration of CO2 that does, leak into water, right? If that were the case. So we would, potentially, like, we have to have protocols in place as well as bonding, financial assurance, insurance, everything of that nature, to ensure that we can provide, safe drinking water in the worst case scenario. But again, I think, we focus on the Class 6 program and everything that goes into these permits to, one, ensure that that's not going to happen, two, detect it early if it were to happen, and then three, have a mitigation plan in place if it were to happen. And all that is part of what we're doing out here.
I have a question.
Yes.
So I'm gonna, I guess, just set you up for this, because this was a question asked at our last council meeting, and I don't think it was specific, but maybe you could talk just briefly. I think there's a tendency to think you're a for-profit business, that this is skewed towards what you want to do, but could you speak briefly to the amount of people across the state that have been involved in this project? University of Wyoming, geology people. I'm not putting you on the spot, but it's, this isn't just your data. This is lots of people's data.
Yes, there have been, I would argue, thousands of people that have been engaged one way or another. For example, certainly all of the hundreds, if not thousands, of landowner conversations that have taken place here regionally and locally. Part of that also is that we have had 4 different public open house events over the past couple of years. 2 of them were here in Pine Bluffs, 1 in Burns, 1 in Carpenter, to make sure that people had awareness, in particular landowners, since they are directly involved in the project, making sure that they had every opportunity not just to hear from Cody and I, but to talk to our engineering team, our environmental team, our project construction and restoration teams. And so those open houses, I think, have been very important from the standpoint of making sure people have that great awareness of all those details. In addition to that, we've had conversations with local elected officials, obviously here in the city of Pine Bluffs, also county commissioners. We've had several engagements with them, as well as their respective planning departments. We've had a number of conversations with state officials, local state senators, state representatives, as well as certainly the governor's office and a variety of other legislators that have been working on the development again, of this regulatory framework that have been supporters of seeing these investments come to the state, whether that's, members of the Minerals Committee in the Wyoming State Senate, or in the House, or a variety of other legislative leaders. Worked with the University of Wyoming. They've been a great partner in a number of ways from the academic standpoint and the academic side. We've worked with organizations like Cheyenne Leads, the Wyoming Business Alliance, and other stakeholder groups to make sure that we have communication broadly across the community as a whole. We've also had multiple engagements with first responders locally. We've had first responder trainings. CO2 is very safe, but you want to make sure that as it relates to that first responder engagement, that they have awareness of what is in the pipe. There are different tactics to responding to a CO2 leak versus a natural gas leak, or a crude oil leak, or some other sort of scenario that first responders are trained to respond to. And so we've wanted to make sure that they have that awareness and have coordinated, again, multiple rounds of those trainings. So thousands and thousands, I think, of engagements over the past 3 years. I probably forgot
Well, and
something,
I was gonna mention to, with, like, the University of Wyoming has been working carbon sequestration for a couple of decades. There's an active, carbon sequestration's been happening in the western part of the state for approximately 20 years. And then the University of Wyoming has drilled, or has a couple of these projects going on. One in the western part of the state near Rock Springs, and one up near Gillette. But they have entire departments that study this and work on these things. And they have also been, as Scott mentioned, a partner in a sense. They've come to our open houses as well to help try to educate folks with the work that they're doing and the academia behind it as well.
Are there any other areas in the country where they've been doing this for an extended period of time that's proven that there's no issues or problems?
So the question is are there other areas of the country that this has been happening where extended period of time and proven that there aren't issues? So carbon sequestration has happened typically under different classification of injection wells. And so the EPA has several classifications. This is Class 6. It's effectively the newest and most highly regulated classification of injection wells. Even though they're, like Class 2s, there are different classifications regarding the type of material that is being injected. CO2 has usually been done under different classifications, and it's been used for enhanced oil recovery, things of that nature. The Class 6 program is effectively a newer program that's much more highly regulated than those other classifications. Although the other injection wells, it has been proven and been done for decades. To answer.
In this type of a large project like this, or they're just smaller ones, or?
I'd say, the question is, in this type of a project, large project, a variety. Yeah, there are a variety of these. Now, Class 6 wells, there are active Class 6 injection wells in Illinois and now North Dakota, and then there are a bunch scheduled to be approved in other parts of the country as well. But absolutely, it's being done.
But there's none that are full that they've exhausted, filling them full and just sitting there. There's none of those. Yeah,
The question is, there aren't any that are full that are, I guess, to that stage of the process. Not that I'm aware of. I can't say that with absolute certainty. None under the Class 6 program, for sure.
Are there any other questions from the council?
I have one. You had mentioned that the pipeline's out there and there are potential risks involved. Do you offer any training to first responders or anything that we can use for knowing how to deal with this? I'll let you.
Yeah, so we've been actively engaging the county emergency manager and have coordinated multiple first responder trainings where we work with county emergency management, who coordinates with sheriff's office, with fire departments, in making sure that those individuals have been invited and attended those trainings. There's a variety of things that they go through. They go through the national emergency response guidebook and the various protocols that exist for different substances. They do demos. It's been something I think that's been pretty successful, where we've had these different trainings across the entire development area, not just here in Wyoming in the sequestration hub, but across the broader system.
I think we've got, what, 2 or 3 in Laramie County?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, we did have one here, I'm fire chief here in Pine Bluffs, so.
Okay.
We did have one here about a year ago. There was about 8 different agencies involved. About 30 people showed up from across the county that they put on, so.
Janet, do you have a
Validation.
question?
A statement. Oh, I just wanted to thank you guys for coming down. I
Yeah.
found your presentation interesting and I learned a lot. And I also want to thank you for taking your time so everyone could come and ask their questions. So just mostly a thank you, and I enjoyed learning about this process.
I guess the question I would ask is, obviously there's a lot of interest in this, and we may not be able to answer everybody's questions tonight. Is there a place that we could direct questions to that maybe we don't get a chance to ask you tonight, or that come up in the next days and weeks?
Yes, absolutely. So we have, the easiest way is to email us at community@tallgrass.com. Community@tallgrass.com. We have built out a feedback mechanism with community comments, questions that we can then respond to. I have some cards here with some other contact information, a phone number. I can perhaps grab those, and you can either leave them over here at the table, or I can hand them to you all in case you get questions and you can direct folks. Also, as I know you have agenda with other items on it, we can also be available out in the lobby area for other people who have other questions. Maybe you didn't get the chance to ask your question, but we can stick around for a bit and be available there as well.
Yeah,
Appreciate that.
Thank you
that
so
would
much.
be great. Do you have anything else?
I don't, but thank you for being here.
Yeah, we
Yes,
appreciate
thank you.
it, and thank you for everyone coming out to ask your questions.
Great.
Great job.
Thank you for your
Thank you very
time.
much.
I think we're gonna take like a 5-minute recess.
Stretch break?
back, everyone. Hey, guys.
Hey, we're gonna get
Marijuana.
rolling.
Okay.
I'd like to thank the folks from Tallgrass for being here again, and we're ready to move on. So the next item on the agenda is Resolution 2025-03, a resolution authorizing the mayor to sign a warranty deed and any other fiscal closing documents for the sale of property located at Lot 45 Prairie View subdivision in Pine Bluffs, Laramie County, Wyoming.
I move to adopt resolution 2025-03.
Second it.
It's been moved and seconded to adopt resolution 2025-03. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carried. Whatever. Next item is resolution 2025-04, a resolution authorizing the mayor to sign the warranty deed and any other final closing documents for the sale of the property located at Lot 44 Prairie View subdivision in Pine Bluffs, Laramie County, Wyoming.
I move to adopt resolution 2025-04.
Second.
Moved and seconded to adopt resolution 2025-04. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Resolution adopted. Next item is the discussion of our regular meeting schedule and changes to that. I think we were sent out, I don't have it in front of me, but we were kind of sent out some ideas. I think it's kind of in our discussions, or at least my discussions with people, everyone I've talked to kind of agrees that we had quite a 2024 of, it just was not working well. And so I don't want to rehash that, but I would be, like to discuss moving it, changing our meeting schedule to something we can more closely follow that doesn't interfere with other meetings. So any thoughts?
So I know that there were a couple of ideas that were proposed, possibly having both meetings on Mondays, the first and the third, or the second and fourth. And I think that's probably good for consistency's sake. My preference would be for the second and fourth Mondays due to another conflict.
I also like the second and fourth, mostly because I think that's when like the city of Cheyenne meets and Burns meets a lot, so we probably don't have any of these extra things like our elected officials dinners come up, but I'm open to either one, honestly.
Doesn't the school board meet Mondays on the second?
The second Monday? Well, we're currently doing the second Monday.
I know, and I believe they do, but I wanna make sure that's always accurate. I'll ask our resident.
They usually have the Cal meeting the first Wednesday of the month,
Okay.
and then the regular board meeting is the following Monday. So sometimes it's the first Monday, sometimes it's the second. It depends on when the first Wednesday falls for the Cal meeting.
Okay.
Are you thinking that there's a conflict with what we've been doing up to now?
Yeah, I think it, sometimes, so apparently not always, limits who can go to what, us included.
I think, and I'm not disagreeing with that. I think there's sometimes we maybe run long, but typically we accomplish our meetings
True, you have
before
been very
they start.
efficient. Appreciate that.
So,
I'm
I-
okay with the second and fourth, I guess.
if
with just that
you
awareness
two both
that
have
sometimes-
conflicts and the second and fourth works better, I have no reason to. I will say, just for the current year, I have scheduled a few conflicts that I can't move, but they are one-off conflicts for myself personally, and so I don't want that to enter into the decision-making, and we'll figure that out when we get there. So if what works best for these two, I guess you haven't weighed in.
My conflicts are so transient
But there's no board meetings that
no, there's nothing that I know of.
conflict. I mean, there's stuff, but I'm saying
I'm okay
your
with it.
board responsibilities or anything that's kind of what we're doing now is.
No, I'm good with it.
So is that
I don't know.
I'm good
everybody's
with-
wish?
I'm good with second and fourth.
Legal counsel?
It does align up
good
with
that day?
Burns and Cheyenne.
I guess then we'd just be aware when you have school meetings, the same night as the council meeting, but.
Conflicts, not conflict.
And I was just looking at the calendar, it's kind of half and half.
Conflicts.
Usually it's
I
not a
like
problem,
2 and
just
4.
Sometimes I think it's going to
That-
be.
That way I can watch
What's that?
the NCAA National Championship.
It's on the second and fourth.
It's always on a Monday, first Monday. so.
But, yeah.
There you go.
No,
Well, we could go especially.
we'll adapt.
Yeah.
But I would just like to point out that we would typically been having the work sessions, but, we found ourselves at times being like it used to be where we weren't accomplishing a whole heck of a lot on this second meeting or the first meeting, one or the other, but I think it's still in the best interest of everything to go back to 2 meetings. Or to remain at 2, but get them aligned more properly. So I'm good with that. If I hear a motion, I guess we can.
Go ahead.
I move to make our meeting schedule fall on the second and fourth Mondays of the month at
Second.
6 p.m.
At 6 p.m.
It's been moved and seconded to schedule the regular town council meetings on the second and fourth Mondays of each month at 6 p.m. Any other
Mayor,
discussion?
we do have one little thing there to think about. There's actually an ordinance that establishes our meetings.
Yes.
Which we did amend.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's gonna take 3 readings.
Yes, so we'll have that ordinance ready for the next meeting.
Okay, so we didn't need to make a motion.
Right, my question to that is, do we need to, repeal the last ordinance modification?
I'll have to
And
look
then-
at it
Okay,
to
I'll
know.
email it to you and then,
Yeah, I'll have to look at it to know, but
Okay.
I would recommend that the form of the motion be, that we temporarily, adopt that meeting schedule pending, consideration of an ordinance to set it.
Makes sense.
Great. Well, I move that we temporarily set our meeting schedule to the second and fourth Mondays of the month at 6 p.m. until such changes can be made to the ordinance.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to temporarily change the meeting dates to the second and fourth Monday at 6 p.m. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. On to visitor comments. Mr. Allaby.
Good evening, council. I am Mike Pockle, homeowner at 512 Walnut. I had a building permit that I got December 11th, 2023, good for 1 year. Before December 11th, 2024, I dropped off a check at the town with the intent of keeping that building permit active for another year. Ms. Leanne suggested I come visit with you all to see if you have any questions about that.
Well, I will fire off a question. Like, when might we expect to see this project to completion?
I'd hope to have it done within that initial year. Had a health concern that requires surgery that slowed down my progress. So we've been talking with contractors to see about, having them getting bids to get the work finished up more quickly.
Are you referring to the building permit for the patio area that you're putting on?
Yes.
From last year? Okay, and I think that maybe they are also referring to the original building permit for the other
Siding,
addition.
yes,
Yeah.
yes. It's all the same, I believe.
It's all gonna be the same?
Yep.
Okay.
Any other questions?
I think that answers my main question.
I just, you know, I believe the house next to you is on the market, and I hope you remember that your partially finished house literally does impact people around you. And I understand if that's your jam, that's what you wanna do. But literally has an impact on others. And so,
Understand.
to the extent that, you know, we could work really hard to accomplish that this year, that would be great. And frankly, this is the same song and dance I gave you last year. I really would hope that we don't have the same discussion next year, because we will have a discussion next year. I'm just not gonna let you apply for a permit every year. So, that's where I'm at. Anyone else?
Same position as last year, private property, I think we get into questionable waters, getting too heavy-handed there. I understand what you're saying, but I also understand Mike's view of it being his property and his ability to work on it as he so chooses. I appreciate you coming in though again. And
Of course,
updating
yes.
us on your situation.
Oh, thanks. And for sure, don't want to impact anyone else's property in the area. I'm very aware of that.
Sometimes it just happens.
All right, thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
Never mind. We don't have an action item on the agenda, so. Any other visitor comments? I think they're still all outside commenting. You have to stay and lock up after they're done.
He's got his Dr. Pepper.
Okay. Department reports, Jenna?
Just a quick update from the senior center from December. Current members, 254. They served 1,070 meals. 89 of their clients participated in activities. Transit traveled quite a bit, about 1,029 miles to 162 different stops. They have 7 clients on their caregiving program. Their food pantry client list is 93 households, and they served 27 in December and distributed 80 Christmas food boxes. So, keeping quite busy.
Great.
And that's it.
All right, thank you. Dave?
No real update. The airport advisory committee has a meeting this Thursday, so maybe at the next board meeting I'll have an update.
Okay, great. Ally?
Our WHAM Winter Conference wrapped up on Friday. A lot of networking opportunities this year. I think they kept us busier than ever. Well attended, I think just kind of a different shift for WHAM, so really exciting to see where that goes next, except for the fact that they are monitoring 100 bills for us right now, or thereabout. So in the next few days, that all does wrap up as far as filing new bills goes. So by February 3rd, I think we should probably have a new total count, and if anything comes out with like a screeching concern, I will reach out to you guys, or if you see something, let me know, and I can pass that on to Ashley and team. If something that they're not monitoring concerns you, certainly let us know.
I just want to add to that, at the meetings, Ally was voted in as our new Region 1 town representative. So we have city representative from Region 1 and a town representative from Region 1, and so.
Awesome. Yeah, congratulations.
That was pretty awesome.
I've got nothing.
Great. Alex?
Nothing that pertains to the law, but I will say that Esther has been helping out with the food pantry, and she never shuts up about the job Alicia's doing
That's good.
and what a great service that is to the community. She really enjoys working there.
Great. We're looking to have that and her
Yeah.
and all the volunteers. Austin?
Nothing, I will add that, all members of the police department went to the first tall grass, training for pipeline safety. And then I, went to the, Laramie County Management, department meetings as well, so if anything ever did happen, we're trained up as well.
Great. Leanne?
We don't really have anything. We started our ADP timesheet payroll 2 weeks ago, and it seems to be going smoothly, so. Other than that, I don't have anything.
Kim?
As I mentioned in the workshop, we're currently working on a cost proposal to add in, to the north property, to add in the industrial area for a lot of the infrastructure components, primarily water and sewer and roadways. And so we anticipate having that cost proposal this week so that we can compare the needs versus how far we need to go to get funding for that. We will be actively starting the pedestrian ADA walkway study. So we anticipate coming out with a schedule of community events. It would be great if we could schedule a session with y'all. I'll try to just maybe schedule it during our next workshop for the engineer to meet with you to understand what, some of your concerns and goals are in the community. As soon as that is scheduled, I'll send out an email so you'll know kind of what the topic will be. And again, I'll try to get that scheduled for our regularly scheduled workshop so that we don't have to come in a separate time. Our EMTs have been putting out feelers to see if there's interest in us hosting another EMT course. This would be for new EMTs that would like to earn basic EMT certification. Their second information session is going to be held February 3rd at 7 o'clock at the fire station. It'll be posted on our Facebook page and as well as the rec page. And again, these are just feelers to see if we have enough people interested to make it kind of a break-even class to cover the expense of our instructors. And that's about all I have for now. As you know, we've reached out to electric engineers to also see about moving forward with a project to update our electric system.
Great. Announcements and meetings, I think that still holds true. Next meeting is Monday, February 10th at 6 p.m. Any additional meetings or announcements? Okay.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Moved and seconded to adjourn. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.